guys, Samantha from Jessama Tutorials here, and today I'm going to be showing you a fun, relaxing project using a texture stamp, some white polymer clay, and various different mica powders, as you can see here. So today I'm going to be going with an autumn theme, as you can see from the mica powder colours that I've chosen, and I have a floral texture stamp here. Keep in mind though, you can use any texture stamp you want that has some sort of a image based texture rather than a texture based texture, and what I mean by that is you can see images such as flowers, animals, leaves, some sort of scenery. And then any colour of mica powder that you want. I'm going with autumn themed colours, but you can use any colours you want. The only thing that you will need to stick with is white polymer clay, though any strong brand will work. I am going to be using Polymer today though. Okay, so this has already been conditioned through my pasta machine on my thickest setting, which is about 2mm thick. And so now, before we apply our texture, I want to grab some plain printing paper, because we want our piece sitting on some plain printing paper, and I also want to burnish it with the printing paper so that it has a nice smooth surface, which is quite important because we're going to be putting mica powders down in a fairly specific pattern, so you want this to be nice and smooth and even, like so. Okay, and this will also have smoothed out the back, which I also want you to just go through and burnish, and then I want you to keep it on this piece of paper because it will keep the back clean. And smooth. Now you can see we have a little bit of dirt on the surface here, so I'm just going to bring it over some isopropyl alcohol and a little wet wipe. So just give it a spray, like so. Then take this and smooth over the surface. And now you can leave hairs, so just be careful of that. But mostly I'm trying to get rid of any powder or dirt that might be on here that can discolour the clay. And if I get a piece of hair on there, I will probably just gently pick that off with a blade, like so. Then just burnish that again, wherever you nicked it. Okay, now we're just about ready to get started. I just want to make sure that this is nice and clean. So, yeah, there was a little bit of powder on there. Alright. So our first thing to do is going to be to select whichever cutter you want to use, or shape, it doesn't have to be a cutter, for your piece. And I'm using this heart donut of mine. I'm just gently going to press in. I'm not pressing too hard, I just want an outline. And then from that outline I'm going to trim away this excess white, because I don't want to have waste clay, or at least I want to prevent as much waste as possible. So by trimming away this excess, you can just pop that back with your white clay, and you can use it in some other project, because I only need the clay that is going to be on the heart. Now the reason I haven't just cut out the piece of clay with the heart, with the cutter, so that we have zero waste clay, is because we're going to be using a texture stamp and we're going to be brushing things on it, and it can get a little distorted if it's already the clean cut shape. So I prefer to keep it like this, and then after we have painted on our effects I will cut it out completely. Now here's the texture. So it's a nice little silicone stamp, and there you can see the image quite nicely, but the texture stamp itself is clear. So put this to the side, and I'm going to actually grab an acrylic block because I'm going to be inking. So I've just got an acrylic block here. Just place that down onto the block. And now just a quick mention, this comes with the texture stamp. You have a little clear piece of plastic and the image base. You always want to keep the texture stamp sandwich between these two. When it's stored, it will keep it clear of lint and dust, and it will just give it a much longer life. Okay, so now I'm going to use some stays on ink. You could brush on some black paint over the surface, but it won't give as clear an image. So I go with StazOn ink, and I've just got my piece of paper off to the side here so that I can get to that quickly when I need to. So let me just move this here so you can see, because we need to act fairly quickly. Okay, so they're both in the image. Then I'm just going to take this and I'm going to ink the stamp. And just make sure you get a nice, clean, even cover of this ink. Okay, and turn that. And then press nice and hard. And if you get a bit of the texture, that's fine. You just want to make sure that we get a nice, clean, even texture, even print. There we go. See, that looks really nice. Now I'm going to put this off to the side. You just need some isopropyl alcohol and a wet wipe to quickly clean that. It's generally better to clean it while it's wet. So all I do is give it a quick spray. And there you can see how that's changed it. And then wipe. And it will stain your texture, but that's fine. It's so long as we get rid of the surface effect. Just don't want ink sitting on here for our next stamping. Okay. And there we go. That's generally how I would clean my texture. And you can see it has stained it slightly, but not too much. Okay, then just quickly wipe your tile clear of that ink. Make sure to put the plastic cover back on your StazOn ink and close that up before you move on, because that will dry out. Okay, then we'll bring this over. Now this should be dry before you move on to the next step, so if you need to wait for it or just blow on it, do that. You do not want to move on to the next step before you've done that. Okay, then grab a piece of pinching paper and I want you to gently burnish, and this is just going to remove any texture that might have been imprinted onto the white clay from the texture stamp. Just remove that, and it might pick up a little bit of ink, but it shouldn't. You can see there's very little ink. That is exactly what you want. That's why I said to wait for it to dry, because if you didn't let it dry, the paper would have picked up a lot more of the ink and your pattern would not be nearly as crisp. So now I'm going to open up, I think I will probably start with the orange and red colour spectrum. So I'll just open those up and let's see, can you see them off to the side there? Yes. And again, any mica powder colour that you want will work. These are the colours that I'm going with. You want a nice small brush, and I'm going to start with the darkest colour. And I'm going to work that in. Then I'm going to move on to a little bit of the light colour. So. Then finally I'm going to move on to the lightest colour that I have here, which is this nice gold. Then once you've done that, gently burnish the area just to get a nice even cover with the mica powder, like so. And then I would do that for all the little leaves. And you just go over and you colour whichever areas you want in whatever colour mica you have. I have these green ones over here for these little green bits, but some of the other areas I'm going to be painting in red. So just play around, do what you need to do. Make sure to have a very small amount of mica powder on your brush, because you don't want to really go over the lines. Like I went over the line here, but that's fine because it's still part of the flower. But just bear in mind that you cannot remove the mica powder once you've put it on. And if you have excess mica powder, by all means do not blow on the surface to get rid of the excess mica powder. You can take your brush, gently tap it, and brush it away like so. But if you blow, you're going to have the mica powder go across your image and you're going to ruin it. So just be careful. If you don't want to work with mica powder, you can work with paints or alcohol inks. The paints, however, are going to cover up the black part of the image, so I wouldn't necessarily use paint. You can use alcohol ink, that will work quite well, but keep in mind again, it can blur the black because the alcohol inside the alcohol ink can interact with the stays on ink and cause it to blur. So mica powder is definitely the best choice here. Pastels will also work. Okay, and here we go. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to flatten this out with a piece of printing paper, like so, because we can get brush marks, brush streaks, and just in general a few little divots. So you want to just smooth this out. And this will also embed the mica powder into the clay so that it doesn't move around after baking, which is quite important. You really do want to make sure that that mica powder is well set into the raw clay. Okay, that up, and it will also take off any excess. And so now what you want to do is you want to just position our cutter into the correct section. Okay, then press, and make sure to press inside this little hole here as well. Just making sure that I'm pressing nice and hard. And now it might get stuck in our cutter, as you can see, because it was sitting on top of paper. So I'm just going to get rid of that. And it will also give us a chance to do our back, since it's stuck inside the cutter anyway. So let's grab a mica powder. So I'm going to be using this one, and this one. Okay, and keep it inside the cutter. If it doesn't get stuck in the cutter, then it's perfectly fine the way it is. But since it's there anyway, I'm going to decorate the back. So I'll just grab a larger brush, and I'm going to brush that onto the back. And make sure that you brush it on nice and evenly, and just make sure that you really burnish that in as well, because you want that mica powder to stick thoroughly to that clay, because we can't burnish it this time around. Okay. So I think that's probably just about enough of the green. Just make sure to get these edges so there's no white showing. Then I'll close that up. Open up the gold. That in. And then we're going to burnish that over the green. Like so they kind of blend together. Same over here. Like so. Okay. And finally, we're just going to pop on our red. Well, not red, it's more of an orange really. And make sure to burnish that in as well so that you cover up the seam so that it looks like it's fading into each other. Like so. Okay, then just gently brush over the surface a few times just to make sure that it's all smoothed in. And there's our back. Okay. And just quickly wipe away any excess mica powder. Bring over a spare piece of paper. And just make sure that your fingers are clean before you do this, because you don't want to be getting mica powder onto areas where you don't want to get it. Just very carefully gonna coax this out of the cutter. Okay, and if I have to, I can use the blunt end of my brush to help along with this. This is just a tight spot. And if you had burnished this onto a tile and then cut it out, it wouldn't have stuck to the cutter. It was just because it was on that piece of paper. Okay. Now we're going to want to just burnish that lightly again, just to get rid of any bumps or bumps from the pushing out the cutter process. Okay, there we go. Now I'm just going to lift that up and just be careful because the mica powder can get moved around, so try not to handle it too much. All I want to do is I just want to smooth off these sides. Sorry, I went off camera there. Okay, so I just use my fingers to just smooth around the edges. Okay, and I'm just going to pop that down and I'll just burnish it one last time, and then I'm going to put that into the oven for an hour at pretty much recommended temperature, and then when it is done we can apply resin to it. I just want to show you how nice and sparkly that is going to be later on. And if you need to apply corrections, you can most certainly do that. Like there's this one section here that I feel is not very bright. You can always apply a little bit of correction if you want at any point. Okay, and then but once you put it in the oven, you can't apply this correction anymore. So if you're unhappy with something, fix it before it goes into the oven. Okay, and here it is baked. So now I just want to clean up these sides. Now you can either do a polymer clay smear along the sides, but it would be difficult to do it inside here. Basically impossible actually. So in this case I'm going to be using a little bit of paint. Now if your sides are really ragged and don't look very smooth, then you're going to want to use some black liquid clay to smooth it off, or sand them, either way. But these ones are quite smooth anyway, so we can use some paint to do this. So just use some nice black paint and a smooth brush, and just brush on a little bit onto your brush. And then brush along the sides. And you may need to do more than one coat to get a nice even black appearance. And just continue doing that the whole way along. Make sure not to get it on the front or the back, you just want it along the sides. Okay, then this is how it came out. And I also put it back in the oven for about 10 minutes at pretty much recommended temperature, just to set the paint. It will make it a lot harder to scratch off of the edges. Now we do need to seal this because it's got mica powder and paint on it, so I'm going to be using a Liquitex matte varnish for the back and sides, and then we're going to apply resin to the front. So just grab a brush, and you want to soak the brush because you don't want brush strokes, so that you create kind of like a very shallow puddle across the surface. Okay, work fairly quickly because this matte varnish dries very quickly. So you want to work pretty quickly with this. And again, keep the brush pretty well soaked while you're doing this, and that will help prevent creating brush strokes. Okay. Then brush along the sides as well. Don't make it too wet when you're brushing along the sides though, because you don't want it to be spilling or dripping. Okay. And you might have to do the side a little bit at a time because you're not going to be able to hold it. Okay. But then basically once the back and sides have dried, then we can apply resin to the front. Okay, now I want to move on to applying the resin to the front. So pop it onto a resin mat, like so. And I'm going to be using Lisa Pavelka's Magic Gloss. And now I know that a lot of you have a bit of trouble with this, so I'm going to explain this in depth. So first, you're going to drop a little bit of the resin onto your piece. And now you want to drop a little bit on to begin with. And this is because if you put too much on, it will spill over. This is not how much you're going to need though. So just keep that in mind, please. Then you're going to drag it to the edges. Now keep in mind, it is probably going to pull back because we do not have enough resin on here to cover the whole piece. But we'll be able to drag it out without it spilling off the edge, which is the important bit. So we're still going to need to add more resin to this. And I think the place where people have trouble is they don't understand how much resin you actually need to add. This is a doming resin and it has a very nice large dome, but that requires a fair amount of resin to dome. So if it's pulling away from the edges, it means that you have not added enough resin to create your dome. So that's really what causes the issue. So if you're having trouble with the edges pulling away, it means that you've not applied enough resin. So the best way to see whether you've applied enough is to sit and wait, probably half a minute at most, and you'll see that it starts to edge away from some areas. If that happens, you need to add a touch more resin. Now another way that the resin could pull away is if your polymer clay is not even, if the surface is not flat. In that case, before putting the resin on, use a heat gun or pop it into the oven for probably about 10 minutes at the recommended temperature, and then grab a tile while it's still hot and press directly down onto it and wait until it cools. And that way your surface should be completely flat, because this is a doming resin. It doesn't cover areas, it covers areas evenly. So if there's a raised point, you're going to get less resin on that. So make sure your polymer clay piece is flat before applying the resin. So now that's basically all I need to do. Now we're going to put that into a UV light for probably about 15 minutes just to let it cure, and then once it's cured I'll be able to show you what it looks like. Okay, so here it is out of the UV light. You can see how beautiful it is. It's got a nice kind of golden shimmer to it, but you can see the image very clearly. So now what I want to do is I just want to give it a little bit of a drill so that I can fit a bail onto it. And so you want to figure out which way you want it to hang. So I think I want to drill it around here. So I'm just going to bring over a drill. And now when you're drilling resin, you always drill from the resin side first. And the reason for this is because if you drill from the back, you'll find that the drill actually pushes the resin up and off of the clay, therefore creating this weird kind of broken, crackly, opaque spot that isn't very pleasant and that you can't fix. If you drill from the top of the resin, it pushes down on the resin, pushing it down onto the clay, therefore avoiding that. So just an important note. Okay. Then I've got this cute little pinch bail here. And just open it up a little bit. There we go. And then pinch. And I'll just squeeze. Okay. Then I have a jump ring. Nice thick silver jump ring. And a ready-made rubber cord. Any black cord will work, but I do particularly like this cord. It's easy to use and it works pretty well. It's also very comfy to wear. There we go. And there we go, very easy way to string it. Okay. And there we go, that is the finished piece. So that's basically it for today's tutorial. Keep in mind you can use different colours of mica powder, you can use a different image stamp. It's completely up to you, this is very versatile, but I just thought that I would give you the idea. So if you liked the tutorial, please do let me know in the comments below, and if you would like to support this channel, please do consider becoming a patron. I'll provide a link to that in the description below. It helps keep this channel running and allows me to post videos every single week, so do please consider becoming a patron. And as always, I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.